Well, thank you. We're now starting season 7, amazingly, of Black History Conversations. We started well over 2 years ago. It was Black History Month then. We were looking around the world at the impact of the Black Lives Matter responses to George Floyd's murder. And since then, we've kept going on a more or less a weekly basis. We've just finished a very interesting project over the summer in the UK. Well, I'll tell you about that over the last couple of months. Now, we're delighted that we're welcoming Professor Sir Geoff Palmer with us today. I'm Liz Millman from Learning Links International. And we're going to be hearing about the successful outcome of the Edinburgh Slavery and Colonialism Legacy Review. Okay, and we've also got with us Dr. Hilary Robertson Hickling, and I'm hoping that June Elizabeth will join us as well, because this is a project I was just talking to you about, exploring ways to bring healing to trauma. And the resulting thing from that is that we've now got the Windrush Allies Network. So welcome to you all, and I'm really pleased that we're getting started today. At the end of the session, I usually do this at the beginning of the session, but I will quickly do the acknowledgement to country. I'm here in Australia, as is one of the other participants today, and I respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, traditional owners of the land on which I'm living, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And later on in the session, I'd really love to share this with you. It's a beautiful rendition of the song I Am Australian. So we'll celebrate David with that in a little bit, but we need to get on now. But it's traditional always in Jamaica, and I'm aware we've got colleagues in Jamaica, from Jamaica, and it's a normal practice to say a prayer at the beginning of the session. So I thought we'd start this season with a prayer. So can I ask you, Vivian, if you would do us the honours, please?
Let us pray. Let us become still before God, who is our maker, defender, redeemer, and friend, and the source of all healing. Gracious God, we place forgiveness in our consciousness. Gracious God, we place healing in our consciousness. Gracious God, we thank you for your missionaries of healing, for those who have come together this day to make planet Earth a better place. We would want to thank in a very special way your servant, Liz, for coordinating her tireless work. Grant, gracious God, that what we do today will be to your glory and the extension of your kingdom here on earth. For yours is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We sometimes, well, throughout season 6, we reflected on the challenges faced by Ukraine. I think we need to reflect on wider challenges, but also the weather challenges. And it's interesting, Marcia's just said that she can't get a consistent line because the storms are so bad in the UK at the moment. And these are follow on from the storms that have gone through the Caribbean and are going through the States. So not an easy world. And I've been listening a little bit to the news from the UK, and I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to suggest, Geoff, that we talk with you. Sir Geoff Palmer, Professor Sir Geoff Palmer, it's a real honour that you've joined us again. I'm really grateful that you've been able to manage the technology and join with us. And I have to thank you so much for the times when you've helped me over the last years as I've stumbled along my journey to understand Black history. But I quite agree with you. When we were chatting earlier, we were talking about the project to do with the challenges that the so-called Windrush generation can be facing if they have to deal with the Home Office. But the points that you made about the essentialness of understanding the history of slavery and understanding the traumas, the layers and layers of trauma in that history. And we'll talk some more about that. But at the moment, Geoff, I'd like you to tell us about the work that you've been doing in Edinburgh and your successes, but maybe also some of the challenges that you've got, because I know you have. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much, Liz, for that. I've got to give a talk, but then I've just noticed on another phone that some TV station wants to speak to me, the university. You know, I'm Chancellor of the Heriot Watt now.
Yes.
They just emailed me to say a TV station wants to speak to you about the statue in Edinburgh, the Henry Dundas statue, which I will come to when I speak, because it's critical.
Are you all right to speak to us now, or do you want to do that call?
No, I'm going to speak to you first, and then I've told them to wait
Thank you.
until I'm finished.
Okay.
Anyway, how do I start? Well, I came to Britain in 1955. My mom came in 1951. So we're both members of the Windrush generation by definition. And it was nice to feel so important, because we've lived there for so long until people told us we were the Windrush generation. My dear mother, who passed away in 2003, we lived in Holloway near Islington, and then we lived in Haringey. And then I went to university at Leicester University, and then I went back to London, and then I came to Edinburgh. So those are my British connections. Liverpool, London, Leicester, Edinburgh. And what I've noticed, I've just spoken to the lawyer, one of the lawyers dealing with the Windrush situation. He came up here with his son just to have a chat with me over a few days. And one of the things he told me was that the decisions of the court recently, you know, in terms of compensation, what the judge said was that, yes, you know, you people have rights in terms of British rights, but you're not British in that sense, legally, because that was removed by certain laws in the 70s and 80s. So we've got a British concept of ourselves, but we've got to look at those laws which were passed in the 70s and 80s to realize that our rights were taken away. The problem is that, you know, we have a lot of activism. However, you know, I was telling some historians yesterday, you know, what the activism is I now have a group in Scotland challenging the council for having changed Henry Dundas's plaque to put the truth on it, because they can take out a sort of a planning order to get something removed, even though the council put it there with the community's approval. This group realized that legally they can challenge it on planning, using planning operations. Now, if we've got to fight battles, we've got to fight them like that, not just sit and talk, because basically what we're fighting against is exactly what happened during slavery. Our slavery, and I call it our slavery to distinguish it, because when you have discussions People will immediately say, and you have it all the time, or they're thinking it, but we had slavery as well in Britain. The Irish people were slaves, the miners were slaves, the Sultans were slaves, the Africans had slaves, the Arabs had slaves. So what's the big deal about your slavery? And the argument I had to use, and it works because it's the truth. The argument is our slavery was illegal. It was, the laws were passed by the British Parliament, and our slavery had to be abolished. And when it was abolished, the slave owners of 800,000 slaves in the Caribbean got 20 million, which is about 17 billion today. That's our slavery. It was chattel. So no matter what we say, you know, I often ask people when they talk about slavery, I say, define your slavery. The word slavery tells us nothing. It's a word which is used in all kinds of contexts. And although that sounds so simple, it is critical, because that is what people use to deny your rights, to use it as a balance. That Professor Bigger at Oxford, that's what he says, you know, history is about balance. So our slavery, what he says, well, there was slavery part. We built roads and schools in the Caribbean. You know, the Royal Navy stopped people slave trading after the British abolished the slave trade. So we should be thanking the Navy. So again, out there around us are people with arguments which are negating what we're trying to say. And we have to be able to respond to that. So I think it was about 3-4 years ago, I looked at it when I was in Edinburgh. I looked at, and this I'm just focusing now on the council's project, which we've just delivered, and it's on the computer, you know, you can find it there. It's 141 pages, 141 pages. And people have seen it. You know, I've said, that's what you've got to do when you deliver a project. That's how it's got to appear. It's got to be reasoned, it's got to be evidence-based, and it's got to be well presented with historical references. Now, when we started that 4 years ago, the council had a small committee, and we were getting nowhere because the descendant of Henry Dundas, First Lord Melville, who sent governors to Jamaica, that's the power he had, he selected governors for the Caribbean. He was president of the East India Company, the first biggest company in the world, the East India Company, which made them millions. He controlled that. He controlled the Caribbean, Henry Dundas. Prime Minister Pitt allowed him to do it. Now, what we have, therefore, is a situation where this man who did all that has a 150 feet high statue in the middle of Edinburgh, 150 feet. And his descendant was on the committee, the 10th Viscount. And of course, everything we said, he said, no, no, that's not so. And he had a couple of historians on his side. So I was struggling with one of the guys, trying to put the case that this man's statue is there, the plaque must be changed. And they say, well, why? Why? You know, it's been there for 200 and odd years, the plaque. I said, because in addition to all the other things he did, and I'm going to ask you now the same question. You've heard of William Wilberforce. And most people will not. Most people will not. But if I say to you, tell me the relationship between Henry Dundas and William Wilberforce, you would probably struggle. You may be able to know a little now because of the work we've done. But 5 years ago or whatever, you would not know there was a relationship between Henry Dundas and William Wilberforce. And when I did the work, dug it up and pointed out to the council that Henry Dundas in 1792, the date is critical, William Wilberforce put forward a bill that the slave trade should be abolished immediately. The slave trade, which was transporting 40,000 Africans a year, should be abolished immediately. Henry Dundas, Pitt's number 2 powerful politician, Henry Dundas, who was in league with the slave owners in the Caribbean. Henry Dundas put in one word in that bill. That one word was gradual. The slave trade will be gradually abolished. One word. And that was accepted by the Parliament out of self-interest, because gradually, how long is gradual? That's the powerful political deceptions you're using against harmless people. The slave trade will be abolished gradually. And that stopped Wilberforce and his pals for 15 years. The slave trade wasn't abolished until 1807, from 1792 to 1807, on the basis of one word. And I calculated, nobody's ever done it before, I calculated, and I told the council that one word cost 650,000 Africans to be transported into slavery. 650,000 or 30,000 or whatever it is. And I'm saying, therefore, that plaque must be changed to reflect that. And they went on and they went on and they went on. And the council banned the committee, says we're getting nowhere because you can't agree, and this and that. I also pointed out to them that Henry Dundas selected the governor for Jamaica, Earl Balcarres, 6th Earl Balcarres, 23rd Earl of Crawford, as governor in Jamaica in about 1794, 2 years after gradual abolition started, about 1794. He also selected a governor for Grenada, Ninian Home, of the Home family, the Hume family, Hume. You know, he selected him as governor of Grenada. He got killed in a slave rebellion. Dundas sent the Duke of Wellington's brother to Mysore in order to control the situation there, and the Sultan of Mysore was killed in an encounter. And a Scottish historian, Michael Fry, has that death on the cover of his book, The Dundas Despotism. You could call it The Murder of the Sultan of Mysore, was the cover of his book. And that's been there since the 1990s. And nobody's ever commented on it. He's now changed it. The cover of that book, that awful painting, which has got Scottish links. Now, Dundas also, speaking on a local basis, he was involved in the transportation of the Scottish martyrs to Australia because they wanted the vote. He, as I say, during the Haitian Revolution, he sent troops, he got Balcarres to buy slaves. He got Governor Balcarres to buy slaves in Jamaica to fight for the British in Haiti. And after the Haitian Revolution, they re-enslaved them. So we have a situation where this man had all that power, was doing all that cruelty, And he's ended up with a 150 feet statue. So the committee was banned because they said, oh, you guys can't agree on a narrative for the new plaque if one was decided. And in a funny sort of way, God solved it all in a very awful way, but it's the death of Floyd. At the death of Floyd, I gave a talk for the Black Lives Matter in the park next to the Parliament of Scotland, and it was recorded. And the leader of the council telephoned me, and he said, Jeffrey, we're going to reconstitute that committee. And I said, okay. And we formed a committee, and in 5 days, we had the narrative. And you can look on Google and see the narrative on the new plaque. It starts off by saying, Henry Dundas gradually abolished the slave trade, causing over 500,000 Africans to be transported into slavery. That's what it says. So it starts. And it's now permanent in metal on that statue. Now, the council then asked me to look at the history of Edinburgh in terms of slavery and colonialism. And it took us a couple of years, but we've documented Edinburgh's links with slavery and colonialism. The new town, which is the very posh part of Edinburgh, built in mainly in the 1700s. It over 74 names of houses in that area are on the slave compensation list. We look at, David Hume. And why we're here today, and again, if this is the arguments you've got to use, in that people say, oh, the Enlightenment, the age of reason. I said, don't speak to me about the age of reason because my ancestors were cutting sugarcane. And what I says, which also caused a problem. In the 1750s, David Hume got up one morning and said, he made a statement. That is why Black people have died in large numbers since. He said it, and you can check it. He said, Negroes are inferior to whites. The great mind. Negroes are inferior to whites. And Kant, the philosopher, picked it up and said the Negro race is inferior to whites. And that's the 1700 concept that drove slavery. That has driven racism. And that's what killed Floyd. The point is that how do we remove that view from people's minds? Because we all have it, black or white, in a negative, positive, or a traumatic way. And therefore, our report embodies that. And when it was presented to the council a couple of months ago, everybody was fearful. We've got 10 recommendations. The first recommendation is Edinburgh Council should apologize. Other recommendations are this history should be in the curriculum. Other recommendations are Edinburgh should set up links with past slave countries. That, in fact, we should work with the museum committee I was on and working together to ensure that museums portray this history properly and effectively. And there are other recommendations, like in terms of supporting local ethnic minority arts, etc., and development. So therefore, when that was published, it was published in the press nationally, no problem. Only though 2 days ago, because the success of this project, the family, the Dundases, who live just down the road still, they are determined, they would rather the statue down because that plaque is there for the world to read. The world to read. And therefore, don't take statues down, put plaques on them. because people don't want to read the truth. Not truth like that. And therefore, for the future, we've got to know our history well and the relationships, because that's the only way you can influence the system, by providing evidence that is irrefutable. Thank you.
Thank you. That was just amazing. Thank you very much indeed. Oh gosh, you've done so well. I mean, this report, the Edinburgh report, is absolutely fantastic. I mean, you mentioned the length of it, 141 pages. The detail, as you say, you've really got the accurate history, and that's the beauty of what you've been doing. Now, I'm sure there are people who would like to comment or ask you questions.
Okay, yep, no problem.
Thank you. All right, Michael.
Well, first, Geoff, it's a great honor and a privilege to talk to you. So I've followed this journey on this plaque. What I'm amazed by, just the comment you throw a line, you said, they would rather it taken down than have the plaque there.
Yeah.
What does that say about who they think they are and what he did? Is that all about shame, putting something under the carpet? Help me understand what was the thinking about taking it down rather than have the plaque up there.
Well, you see, this is it, that a lot of us, you know, some black people and white people would say, oh, take these statues down, like the young lady from America was saying that, because it gives me trauma when I walk past it. And, you know, to me, I usually say when people say that, if you remove the evidence, you remove the deed. And that's what the opposition wants. They want the deed removed. And therefore, I say, keep up those statues and street names and put plaques and tell the people what these people did. And the fact is that this statue, which, as I say, is so central to Edinburgh, they continue to fight because they if it was a matter of removing the statue, because I've been in committees with them, they would complain about it, you know, taking it down. But the plaque is there. They cannot rest, because the first sentence is, this man caused the transportation of over 600,000 Africans into slavery. Over 600,000. And that's the rationale. I said as well, my ancestors had to face slave owners and fight. Am I going to worry about a bit of metal? That's how I see it.
Thank you. That's good.
I'm sorry, just a quick follow. What I was intrigued by, sorry, Geoff, is
Yeah,
the Dundas family, wanted it taken down rather than have the plaque. That's what I don't understand. Such as their fear, their shame.
Oh yeah, it is about if you are their family, say if it were your family, and there was a plaque, you know, saying that your family killed so many people and whatever, and, you know, there was a picture that it was associated with. If you didn't have the picture, the plaque would not be that relevant. So you'd want the picture removed. And therefore, we've got to put ourselves in that position, that as a family with that distinction, he's the 10th Viscount. Is the first Viscount got his title because of what he did to us. You know, he was made the first Viscount. The point is that I thought about it years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I thought, no, don't take these things down. Put up what they did, and put it all over the country. So when people walk around London or Liverpool or whatever, there's something on the wall. Some people may say, "Oh, that will make me embarrassed." No, when I stand in the middle of Edinburgh now, in that area of the statue, which is called St. Andrew, and I just stand and I watch people going up to the plaque, reading it, And every time they read a sentence, they look up because they can't believe the man up there did that. And that's what we want. And the ramifications, as Mr. Crawford said, is that he knew about Balcarras, and he knew about the Maroons, and he knew whatever, but the originator of it is in the middle of Edinburgh, 150 feet up, glorified. The Haitian people are suffering today because he sent the British Army to Haiti, and he fomented trouble. 40,000 British troops got killed. The only person who's ever mentioned that in terms of attacking Haiti is C.L.R. James. I've got his book just next to me. That description of Dundas's act in Haiti has been in C.L.R. book from the 1970s. And we don't know that because white people didn't put it in their books, which we read. So put up plaques because they don't like it.
Right, that's going to be our motto, I think. Put up plaques. Lovely lady on the, I can't remember her name now. Don't know if you remember, Simon, who spoke about, she's got a business that she actually makes black plaques. That's her business. So it's a good thing. I think one of the things that fascinates me, and then Vivian, I'm going to let you have an opportunity to respond, and I know you want to say something, Marcia, as well. What fascinates me is how important it is to look locally, look at Black history locally. And I think that's one of the things that I'm really keen to push, because you find that even a small community like Bewdley in Worcestershire, they've actually now got a trail. Marcia works on these sorts of walks so that local places know their local history and then weave it into the much bigger history. And what's fascinating today is to hear you and Vivian talking together, because I think it's our shared history. And people in Jamaica have often got a lot more knowledge. Hilary was talking earlier about Robert Rumble and his story. Just an amazing story, which had a very significant impact on the sales of plantations. Much more I could talk about, but I'll let others have a turn. Okay, so Marcio, did you want to come in?
Yes, yes, I would just like to say I actually second what Michael just said. It's absolutely astounding that the family now want the actual whole statue removed. I'd just like to ask Sir Geoff Palmer, have you actually had what I'd call a sit-down conversation with the Dundas family? You're laughing.
Laughing.
I'm very much, have you actually had a conversation with them?
He was on the 10th Viscount, is Robert Dundas. He was on the committee. He's a young guy. He's a young guy, and he's there, and one of his best pals is a member of the royal family, and they play polo together. So, but the statue has never been challenged. The whole thing about his ancestors has never been challenged properly. In fact, a Scottish historian wrote a book called The Dundas Despotism. Now, you would think that Dundas despotism would strike a note that this man was terrible. But you see, that's when you glorified wrongdoing. It was a sense of power. So he's got in that book some horrific stories about Dundas in that book. As I said, he's got the death of the Sultan of Mysore on the cover, as a painting. And what I was saying is not that I'm saying that they want the statue down. I say they would prefer it to come down. Prefer it, because we would think, they want the statue up and the plaques is no big deal. But what I'm saying is that truth, they have to live with that now forever, the family, if that plaque doesn't get changed. And they want the plaque down. That's why they're challenging the council and all kinds of things, technicalities, which I don't know, I don't understand. So the Telegraph rang me last night, the Telegraph newspaper, and said they're going to publish an article today on it, that, you know, the family wants the plaque removed. And of course, the new committee of the family is called the Naval Connections, or the Naval Committee. And because they're trying to use Navy, if it's a Navy committee, you won't protest. But when we know our history well, they've made such a bad mistake, and I put that on my Twitter. I said this family shouldn't use the word naval, because Henry Dundas was also treasurer of the Royal Navy, treasurer. And he was found out to be embezzling the Navy's money. And he was impeached in 1806. He's the last British politician to be impeached. He was impeached. And I've got the court notes of his impeachment that ended his political career in 1806. The slave trade was abolished in 1807. The point is that that's how we have to know our history. So when they do something like that, we can show, it gave me another opportunity to point out what a crook he was, that he would take money from the Navy, which was managing slavery for him, you know, as Secretary of State for War. That's what he was.
I think the word crook is so meaningful and accurate, and we need to talk plain. Really good.
But he was a national hero. He's a national hero, not of Scotland alone, but Britain. The powers that be, they all know about Dundas. They gave him a viscounthood for it. You know? Right.
Oh, gosh. So, Marcia, you had your question. Vivian, do you want to come in now?
Yes. Thank you so much, Liz. We continue to be grateful for your truly outstanding contribution to our endeavors. And I want to thank in a very, very special way, Prof. Jeffrey. We speak up, we are pleased about Sir Geoffrey and his achievements. We are very proud that he has the Jamaican DNA. We speak about his parish of birth, St. Elizabeth, Malvern, I think. Then he went to North Street Congregational School. We tell the children about him. And then to Kingston Senior School, now Kingston High School. And then in Allman Town, where he grew up. And we are so proud of you. The question though, there is a Jamaican of the Rastafarian religion who has written a book. His name is Michael Lord, Bittersweet. Because this discussion we're having this morning is about sugar. And to justify the production of sugar, that's why we're having the discussion. But when the Spaniards came and they wiped out the Taínos with hard work, overwork, then they brought in their own, but their own could not manage the plantation either. It was too much for them. And when our African brothers and sisters came, they could cope. And because they would cope, someone with all the trickery on earth devised this plan. Oh, they are half animal and they are half human. And to further compound the tragedy, that is why I have this name that I now have. And there are some Dundas family here in Jamaica, because as our own Professor Colin Channer would remind us, and I never miss an opportunity to say it, our enslaved did not come through immigration. They came through customs because they were regarded as goods.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of healing that has to take place.
Yes.
And also to put in the center of the room a word called conscience. Is it that these people, the descendants today, have no conscience? When God was giving it away, they ran away? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawford. The fact is that what this really shows, you know, whether they have a conscience or not, is how powerful the truth is. Because that plaque has been up now for months, but they've never rested one day. There's a group of historians, a couple in New Zealand, quite a few in Scotland, and Scotland top historian, Sir Tom Devine, told the Telegraph 3 weeks ago. They want the plaque down because, you know, Professor Palmer is a villain, and he's going to sue me, he says, because I called them a bunch of racists. But he says he's not going to sue me anymore because he doesn't want to turn a villain into a victim. But, you know, I told the journalists, and they published it, I said, I'm dirty tough. I come from Allman Town. So and they published that. And I said, I'm from Allman Town, so whatever they can do, they've now got to kill me. Because I'm going to say what is true, and I'll try and find the evidence to support what I say. And that's where we are at the moment. Find the evidence, because it's there.
Well, that's just so true. And Geoff, I just thank you. The difference that you've made over the years in Scotland has just been amazing. I remember many years ago coming and visiting with Yasser Safari, and to see, you know, the docks in Glasgow and the names of the streets, Jamaica Street, you know, just there. And the work that you've done has just been fantastic. But what you've done is you've based it in sound historical research, so that no one should question you, but yet people are questioning you, and I know are being vindictive against you, and that's I think we've just got to keep on going, haven't we? And we've got to also share the stories of other families. And it was interesting. We had Alex Renton speaking. He researched his family. I think he came to see you, Vivian. His book, Blood Legacy, and he discovered his family papers and his links. And I think it's when people look at their family links that that we may move forward. But it's obviously hard, very hard. Thank you so much, Geoff. Now, is there anybody else who wants to ask Geoff anything? Michael said, thank you, Geoff. It was inspiring and so encouraging. Hilary said, thank you for using your power and status to fight the good fight. We have to realise the ownership of the family's madness is in keeping with the findings of Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery and Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. The Dundas story, interesting point this, the Dundas story parallels the issues of the British royal family, the Windsors. The truth shall make us free, says Hilary. And I think there's a number of interesting things that we can look at in the future and help to record and help to share. Thank you so much, Geoff. That was absolutely brilliant. Now, I know you may have to go on your way now because you've got the TV people waiting for you, but I just wanted to just say one more thing. So thank you ever so much. Thank you. Now, Hilary Robertson Hickling's going to talk to us in a moment because we've been working on this Windrush project, and I really need to get back to you on that. It was a Welsh funded project, so we're kind of focusing on some issues about the Windrush ambassadors. But Hilary, are you there at the moment, or are you looking after your little one? Hilary, are you there? Yes, looks like she is. Okay, Hilary. Right, Hilary, would you like to specifically address Geoff Palmer, because I think he would really be interested to hear about what we were looking at. We set ourselves a little task, Geoff, and we thought we would look at how to heal the trauma being experienced. I shouldn't laugh, but when I realised what we set out to do and how impossible it was to heal the trauma of the so-called Windrush generation and those people having to deal with the Home Office. One of the things I've realised is that we have to look at the layers of trauma going back through history, and that's really important to put into context. But Hilary, over to you.
Okay, so one of the most important things that this discussion is encouraging us to do is to handle the truth. Part of the challenge we have is that there are people who have been very successful using erasure and having a sort of amnesia about the situation. Part of the challenge we have is that if we're able honestly to say this happened, and as a result of this happening, we are now having to address these matters. As I was telling a group of students recently, 19 and 20-year-olds, we need to be able to admit the wrongs of the past. And we also need to be able to recognize that there's a reason why when we go to the doctor, we have to have a history, because otherwise the present does not make sense and we don't know what to do about it. And I recognize that the myths of empire would like to be sustained as being benevolent and so on. There was also brutality, there was avarice and greed. These are human beings. They're, you know, they did all kinds of things, and some of their descendants are benefiting today from these things. No, what we say therefore is that we need to find a way to address each other, just to admit that these things did happen. I noticed that we haven't said much about the Presbyterian Church, of which I am a member of the current the United Church in Jamaica and Cayman Islands, and of a reparations committee, because churches were also involved in both negative and positive ways. So what we are having to do, and in a sense, we are at a great moment in history where we're being able, because of George Floyd and all kind and COVID and so on, we're being forced to have to come to admit that these things really happened. And I know that some people might be saying that, you know, Sir Geoff Palmer is crazy. That's a good crazy though, you know, it's a good kind of crazy, because how dare he raise these things? And why isn't this black man satisfied that they've made him Chancellor of this and Sir of that? But because you have that power, you really have to use it. You know, you just can't go to tea at Balmoral Castle. You have to use this power in a more productive way. And so this is part of this idea that whatever we are doing, we have to ensure that the next generations become aware of the truth and are able to handle it. So the trauma in part comes from a lack of information. Secondly, how do we create redress? One of the ways is that there needs to be compensation in the same way the slave owners were compensated for the loss of slaves. The slaves need to be compensated for their loss of life and loss of liberty and loss of whatever. I mean, so we're just talking about these things being fair. So we're looking at the levels of trauma at the individual level, but we're also looking at systems which exist, the legal structure that allows you to change the law willy-nilly. So you can choose to change it when you feel like it. So you can be a citizen one day and an uncitizen the next day. That's a lot of nonsense, really. That's a lot of nonsense. So we also have to be able, and I agree with you, Sir Geoff, about the way in which we have the knowledge which we use to make the conversation. If you have to abolish something, then clearly there's something wrong with it. It's a different kind of thing where there's no abolition necessary. And compensation, and so there's a whole legal stream of things that needs to be addressed. But there also has to deal with the way in which we use the power. It is unusual to find a black British academic, and I remember there was like 2% of the people who were lecturers in universities. So in order for you to have done all of this, Sir Geoff, this is about having to overcome hurdles upon hurdles upon hurdles. And why should it be that way? Look at this latest madness again. My late husband had a concept of owning our own madness. can you believe that the British government had the audacity to create a new kind of, what is it, visa, from which they excluded people from Africa and the Caribbean, and only had people from the United States, Canada, and whatever? The audacity of these people is just mind-boggling. And guess what? Here I am. I'm a graduate of the University of the West Indies, Johns Hopkins University in England, in America, and University of Birmingham. You know, one of the things that has happened is that they have tried to crush the academic because they want to suggest that Black people can't think for themselves.
Right.
And so what I'm saying is every way in which we need to find ways of dealing with the truth, we have to, and I'm very grateful for you for having done this, and we have to see how we can do much more of it. Because this business about the thinking and, you know, our inability to think. So, and I'm very respectful of the footballers and the athletes and so on, but we also have academicians, we have all kinds of people. We are like everybody else in the world. And so this is something that I think we really need to emphasize. And as I said, I'm very happy for this platform. And I hope that your grandchildren, Sir Geoff, know about this and are helping to carry the work forward. Because if we're not careful, the current generation will have been YouTubed and they will have been all kinds of things, TikTok, and blah, blah, blah. And they will not have known this history, and they will not be able to, in fact, deal with the challenges of this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think you're absolutely correct. And one of the things we must also remember, you know, is the little tricks that I've learned from them, where you're talking and they say, come on now, Hillary, that's the past, you know, we're the future. And I said, the past cannot, it's a statement I've made, which the principal of Glasgow University uses. I said, we cannot change the past, but we can change the consequences, such as racism.
Yes.
For the better, using education.
Absolutely.
We can change the consequences. We have consequences for a lot in our society, like gender prejudice, children prejudice, the way we race prejudice. A lot of those are consequences.
Yes.
And therefore, the argument about the past is irrelevant. It's worse than a red herring. So this is where we, and one of the things I did to a group recently of white academics, are all sitting there with their heads moaning about, saying, you know, I'm jumping to this and that. I said, I'm going to set you a simple question, and I want an answer in 15 seconds. The most you've got is half a second, half a minute. I want you to define race now. Define it. I've never yet got a definition. And I said, that word has killed millions of people. And you can't define it because it's meaningless. What is meaningless, you can't define. And so fundamental issues like that. I was speaking to some Malaysian students, which are part of the Heriot War. And, you know, I was telling them that some of my students are very well known, like the Brewdog Brewers, you know, that make beer, the Brewdog. And I said, the owner is my student. And, oh, how can a black man have taught a guy who runs, you know, one of the most successful companies in the world, and it's relatively new, he's a multi-millionaire. I said, he's my student. I taught him, like many others. One thing I taught them is what is the importance or difference between a belief and truth. And I said, the examples I gave were the students, I could hear them, the silence. I said, you've got two planes on the runway. One is built by a guy who believes he can build a plane. The other one is built by an engineer who knows how to build planes. Which one would you fly in? I said that's people who believe I'm inferior, because it's a belief. There's no evidence. And you've been flying in that. But you won't fly when you think it's going to kill you. So it's how we have got to manage in this so-called, they call themselves scholars and academics. And they called me a brewer. In order to, denigrate your position. But I told them brewers are professionals. I don't have the skill to be a brewer. I teach it. I make brewers. I teach them, but I'm not a brewer. But this is it. They will denigrate you or me or whatever by any means they can in order to negate what you're saying. But the great thing, Hillary, is the world is now listening. The council accepted that report without one complaint. Not one. And all the members of the political parties, Labour, Conservative, Scottish National, not one complaint. That's where we're going to take the truth, because they cannot query it because it's true. So thank you very much.
Liz, I'm going to have to go.
Okay, well, what I'm going to suggest now is that we thank you very much indeed, Hilary. We thank Geoff very much indeed. We ask Simon to stop the recording and we can continue the conversation afterwards. And thank you, Vivian, and everybody else who's present at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
The recording would be great.
I'm sorry.